Whoa,
Oh yeah.
Oh,
that's
wow.
too much. Blimey.
That's a lot of people.
That's about 1,000,000,000 or something.
Yeah.
You know what that reminds me of? This film, Where's Wally?
That's
Yeah,
probably
where's Wally? Where's the
exactly.
patient?
That's exactly right. And the thing is, we want to know about Wally because we want to know Wally's story. But we also want to know about all these numbers. And it is quite a lot, isn't it? You can't have 1,000 stories, there's too many.
Mm,
But somebody in our team has been counting these numbers, right? It's
quite a lot of numbers.
quite a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Freya Tyrer, and I'm a senior epidemiologist at Leicester Real World Evidence Unit, which is based at Leicester General Hospital. And today I'm going to talk about Work Package 1 on the DAPPLE project, which is about end-of-life care recording in GP practices. And we're often called the numbers people because we tend to work with big numbers. And as well as the DAPPLE team, I would like to acknowledge some colleagues of mine at Leicester Real World Evidence Unit, Joanne Mixer, Francesco Siccardi, Claire Gillis, and Kamlesh Kunti, who's our director. So I'm going to talk through what we did, who we studied, our findings, what they mean, and what next for the DAPPLE project. So for our study, we used healthcare records. We used information from healthcare records. And these were mainly GP surgeries and hospitals. And I will say here that the data that we use, the information that we use are anonymous. So we don't know personal details about people, like, I don't know, their names, their exact dates of birth or where they live or anything like that. And you can see why we call the numbers people, because we work with big numbers. So we looked at people who had an end-of-life care record in their at their GP surgery. So, for example, it could be a diagnosis of end-of-life care. It could be a referral for palliative care. It could be something more process-based, like being put on an end-of-life care register. But what we did is we took the first of those records in primary care and we followed up people, looked at their journey after they'd had that first record. And we had big numbers. We had more than 2,000 people with learning disabilities who had one of these end-of-life care records. And we had 300,000 people, or just a little bit over, of people without learning disabilities, who were used as our comparison group, if you like. We wanted to see if there were differences between the two groups. So our first key finding was that people with learning disabilities didn't live as long. After they had their first end-of-life care record, they didn't live as long as those without learning disabilities. So if we look here at a week, we find that around a quarter of people with learning disabilities died within a week of receiving their record, compared with around a sixth, so a smaller proportion of people without learning disabilities. And we don't think this is enough time to prepare. Now, our second finding was interesting. People with learning disabilities tend to have a range of complex conditions and health needs, but we found two particular conditions, dementia and dysphagia, difficulty swallowing. They're already common among people with learning disabilities, but they were much more common in those who were approaching the ends of their lives and had an end-of-life care flag. So this was, I'll talk through the implications of this in a minute, but that was an interesting observation. And our final key finding was that people, after receiving one of the end-of-life care flags, records, people with learning disabilities were less likely to be admitted to hospital. They generally had fewer GP appointments. It wasn't that large, the difference, but it was what we would call statistically significantly different. we found quite similar proportions of people who were referred to specialist palliative care services. I have to say I was surprised that was quite low, but the DAPPLE team weren't that surprised that it was low. So the implications of what we found are we'd like to see better identification of end-of-life care for people with learning disabilities, to give people and their families as much time to prepare as possible. The findings about people having difficulty swallowing and dementia is interesting because they tend to come with communication problems, with difficulty speaking or asking for what you want, which can be really hard at the end of your life, because you want to be able to communicate what you want to say. So we wonder whether communication experts like speech and language therapists or specialist doctors could help. They're already really important, but whether they could really help people at the ends of their lives. And we're also interested in why people with learning disabilities aren't seeing doctors or going into hospital as often. We're not sure if they're treated somewhere else or really what's happening. So we'd like to know more about that, and we think that's a really important thing to look at for the future. So as well as doing future work with the numbers, I think our future work also needs to talk to people with learning disabilities, family members and healthcare professionals to learn much more about what's going on, and get a much greater understanding of people's experiences and how end-of-life care is and currently. So I think we need to look at that. Okay, thank you ever so much for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Amanda, that's exactly how I was feeling. Maybe we should all make it sit like this.
Confused.
Yeah. People with a learning disability and end-of-life care needs were less likely to go to hospital than people without a learning disability. What do we think about that?
Because it depends on how the patient is ending their end of life care.
We've just been chatting, haven't we, Jordan?
We've just been have a chat, and then I think that people should stay home with the patient, and then
Is that because you are surrounded by the people that you know and that you feel comfortable with, rather than being in a hospital with people coming and going that you don't really know? And if you're at home, you're in an environment that's familiar
that's
with
comfortable.
you. Yeah, I get that, George.
Stay home and then get pain under control that way, rather than going into hospital.
Because I find that difficult. When I go into see the GP, they don't have like pictures. They just have notes that they write down. But I think we need to have pictures for people who can't read. And then it's easy for people to go into the hospital.
Not many people were referred to a hospice.
I'd rather be at home than be in a hospice.
So you'd rather have the support from the hospice nurse here in your own home?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Can I ask you one more hat question? Put on your hat if you're still a little bit confused.
That's everyone.
Russell, have you not got a hat on? Are you not? Oh, he's confused. Right, is that everyone? Are we all confused? And Amanda's even got her confused picture out. Okay, so we've listened to all these numbers and we're still a little bit confused. We have lots of questions, don't we, about the stories behind this?
But it seems to me that there seems to be a bit of a gap between people, able-bodied people, and people with learning disability. But that's, I think that's one of the big questions we've got to find out. Why is there a bit of a gap between, an able-bodied person and a person with a learning disability? Is that our support and care is just as important as your care, Elaine, or Fred's care, or Joe's care, or anybody, and everybody, but
So numbers, God, we'll be thinking of numbers this afternoon.
Yes, quite.